welcome back. It's Christine again with the Artist Pod, and today we'll be drawing a maple leaf. As always, I'm using a Wacom Intuos Pro tablet, and I'm drawing straight into Photoshop. So, let's get arting. Alright, so here's the maple leaf. Leaves pretty straightforward. Maple leaves, they have a lot of details. So some leaves, right, you can do that don't have nearly this much detail. Maple leaves, for the most part, what we're going to do is we're going to follow the vein down as we draw it. Long strokes because there's no right fur color. And then from there we'll fan out our other strokes. So nice and quick. The trick is when you start getting into different shapes, you can twist it and turn it. One of the more complicated leaves to draw, though oak leaves, I would probably say, are more complicated than this. You know, these for the most part, you just have, 5 points with little edges that come off the edge. And you can still recognize it as an oak leaf often, even when you don't include these little edges, right? Just like having it kind of come up and off and having these points come off. Usually people can sort of look at that and go, oh, that's a maple leaf. And then we're just going to follow that up. Long strokes, again, you know, there's no fur or feathers, so we don't have to limit that. Following the strokes towards the end of the leaf. So as you come here, and it's okay not to be perfectly straight, especially with leaves, right? There's probably some fluctuation as they're going up and down, as they're, you know, bending and twisting, or even torn here or there. So it's all okay. Like with anything else, though, a light source will potentially determine how it's going to look. Actually, that one stroke was a little long. I feel like it's always when I'm saying it's okay to go a little longer, and then I have a stroke that's excessively long. Coming up in here. And then, you know, same thing on this side as we work our way. So long strokes, not putting a ton of pin pressure. That comes when I start adding the highlight. So this is just the sketching, right? I know I keep saying that, no, you know, you can do long strokes and it's okay to be on the edge, but when you come out too far, right, when I have a stroke that's coming way out here, that's too far. But some variation here, like if I take this off, some of this variation, that's okay. That's perfectly fine within the context of a leaf. It's when it's way out that you wouldn't be able to explain it. And as maple leaves kind of come in towards their base, they have these sort of blocky sections, right? So you kind of have this ribbing that happens right through here where this leaf is going down and this leaf is sort of kicking in, and you have all the little veins that help delineate that. So, you know, you'll have where this middle vein is basically a raised section or a sunken section, depending on what's going on, what side you're drawing it from. But leaves can be pretty easy. Nice and quick to do. And, you know, the other nice thing about maple leaves is they'll turn, you know, multiple colors in the fall. So you have a chance to really illuminate with some interesting colors. Some nice red. Doesn't always have to be green. And if you're doing a bunch of these, you know, mixing and matching different shapes, and as they're falling, just sort of, you know, if you're trying to draw fallen leaves, you know, indicating that they're twisting and turning, you're not always going to see them from this angle. Twisting and turning, and you can see, especially with maple leaves, you can probably see some from above and below at the same time where it's twisting up. But I also think it's good, you know, I've drawn a lot of maple leaves, oddly, in different drawings I've done over the years. It's never been the singular highlighted feature, but I have drawn them a lot. And I do think it is probably good to get used to how it looks before you start adding sort of interesting twists to them, right? I mean, in the research, I always do research before I draw something. I've drawn a maple leaf enough now. Don't really have to research it as much. I typically look it up before I do it, but I don't have to like spend as much time analyzing it. And that's true the more of whatever you're drawing, right? As you get more familiar with drawing that specific thing, it becomes just easier and easier to do. And you also get used to things that you can change or rules that you can break. You know, like not needing to put all of these little jagged edges on it. I know it can look like a maple leaf without it. But I also like to add a lot of details, so for me it goes hand in hand. So before you draw something, especially like a maple leaf that's easy to do, it might not be a bad idea just to draw it out straight like this before you start trying to twist it and turn it, because from here, you know, once you see it in place, you can kind of get an idea of, you know, what if this was more flat and then this is droopy and this is swinging under, and you know what you'd be able to see as the leaf is contorting in like the wind or something else. Probably would look really striking with like mid changing, right? You have some green still on it, but it's changing over to red. That would probably look really cool. I've never done that, but I bet it would look phenomenal. But you have that nice center point you can always draw towards, right? That's what's so nice about maple, or any leaf really. So down each one of these, you have that center line to follow, that center line to follow. Every once in a while, and I think I brought this up before, when I go to draw, it records my finger as a tap, and so I have to erase it out. No big deal, it's just sometimes I don't notice until later. I don't want to leave it there because of this particular style, you'd be able to see it. And you don't have to include the stem, but you know, you can. Obviously we're used to seeing it, so. But when leaves are just falling, you know, you're drawing a ton of leaves just sort of falling down, you don't have to include the stem on those. Maybe one or two having it wouldn't be out of place. It's not that hard though, it's just literally, it's a stick on the back of on the leaf. But it won't necessarily look completely out of place without it. Alright. So there, right, we back out. We can see it even without adding really anything else. We can see that that's a maple leaf. Now, I'm going to add highlights. So I'm going to say the light source is coming from above and to the right. Like always, that means above and in front of, not behind or next to. So as we do this, it'll be full pin pressure. So what I'm going to do, put full pin pressure on this bridge. This is where that main vein's coming through. Because you'd be able to see that clearly. Do the same thing over here. I'm probably going to do it on all of them. Maybe fading some of these out. And then we'll have a chance after we add some of the highlights to add in some of this veining. Fade out just at the tip. Fade this just a little bit and then make it a little brighter in the middle, and then I'm going to fade it out. Alright. And then we'll add some of these highlights. Bearing in mind how the leaves kind of bulge, right? I mentioned earlier, you know, this would be in a little bit of a shadow, and this is in a highlight, because this is angling this way, and this is angling down that way. So this is coming all the way up. Of course, the light source is above and in front of. Edges will be in shadow, but that's easy to do when you're drawing straight to an edge. It's not going to be a lot of real shadowing. Just kind of some on the edges and kind of the valleys between the leaves. I don't really need this on while I'm doing that. So you're going to have some coming over, some highlight coming over. And then it'll fade into the valley with some potential for like the edges and stuff to still be catching light. I'll say that'll fade. And then this guy will kick in. But we want that to be a nice gentle fade. And this is adding some extra detail. I could do the whole thing in a solid green, but sort of bearing in mind the detail of how the leaf would be situated. And this is full pin pressure. And again, you know, even with the highlights, I can put nice long strokes. I only typically adjust that when I'm dealing with either an edge or an animal that has shorter hair. No need otherwise. Not bringing the highlight all the way to the edge, allowing that to taper to give it a little bit of shadowing. It's okay if a few strokes make it, but I want a bright highlight all the way to the edge. All edges are in shadow, right? That's what gives us our three-dimensionality. As illusionists, that's what makes an object look three-dimensional. Of course, that also does change depending on the direction of the light source. If it were right next to, then yes, or behind. With leaves, a light source behind would still potentially illuminate it in interesting ways. You'd really get an illumination of the veining of a leaf. And in this case, still aims kind of towards the light source, but it is kind of going in, so we'll give it a little tiny shadow there. Right, and as we back out, you can kind of see that changes. Still full pin pressure over that middle hump. And then we start to fade it as we come down. Although again, on the tips, you know, you have potential for it to still be catching light because of how long they are away from the point at which it's going down. But they're also still potentially angling in, so it's really kind of however you want to do it. And then after this, we'll focus on adding in those veins, because that, I do think, even when you're drawing something small, you don't have to, but you know, it's one of those chances, and I love chances to add in more detail. It's definitely a chance to add in like an extra burst of detail. Especially when you're really highlighting the leaf in some way. You know, you're really like showcasing it, or it's important to a composition you're drawing. Giving it that extra attention to really like shine. I think can be a nice, can add a lot of nice little detail. If you're doing a lot of little small leaves, you probably wouldn't see it as easily, but just something to keep in mind. Right, this one potentially blocked a little bit. Not as much pin pressure. Same with up here. Potentially some shadowing. Alrighty. So to temper, right, when you have shadowing, the darker the shadow, the deeper the recess, right? Or the higher the peaks around it. So if you want to temper out how deep this appears, I'm not putting full pin pressure, I'm just putting more lines. That'll brighten it up and make it appear not nearly as dark as it is, which in turn makes it seem like it's not as deep of a recess, which is great because they're not that big. I mean, they're there, but they're not astronomical. Right, there we go. I am going to temper this. It's a little too harsh. Don't want to like a harsh transition, although there is a line in the middle that we'll be adding. So that will be somewhat of a harsh transition. Okay, now for the veins, I'm going to once again like reiterate that midline, and I'm putting full pin pressure this time as I do it. The other times I was certainly drawing it in, but not full pin pressure. Might not be able to see that midline. Yeah, but that's fine. Still be there. And in some cases you might be able to see it. Full pin pressure all the way down. You will be able to see the veins because we're changing the direction, right? With the veins, we're going in different directions. Right, you can kind of see it on some of them. Okay, so the veining. So typically with leaves veins, sometimes they line up, sometimes they don't. I find that it looks more natural if they don't ever. And what I mean by that, right, like I have a vein for a leaf, and I'm going to make this nice and kind of light, and then the other vein doesn't start here, it's going to start a little lower. And that's going to be true for all of them. And as I do it, I'm going to make them a little bit more, you know, they're not going to be perfect. They don't need to be. There can be some wobble. It'll look more natural if there's some wobble. Right, never lining them up on that point. So if we take that off, that's kind of what we get. And then along these, there would be even more. Same idea though, never line them up. If you do it. You don't have to do this one. Well, you don't have to do any of it, but. And you know, these lines are shorter on this side of the leaves where they're running into another leaf. Right down in here where both leaves are running into each other. They're going to be longer up in here. And we're going to do that for all of them. I'm not putting full pin pressure. Should also mention that. The reason we can see it is because I'm drawing in a different direction. That's why that our eyes are picking it up. I'm not really putting a ton of pressure. It's just I'm drawing in a different direction. and you get that veining in the leaf. Making sure it's light is important, and I'm lightening it up a little bit more in areas where there's shadow, because I don't need as much pressure for it to see that, for us to be able to see that. So even though it's subtle, some places it's harder to see than others. Easier to see once you add, if you add veins on the veins, because there would be. You get a better sense for it, for where something is, or that it's there at all. Just alternating my strokes. So always, one vein offset away from another, right? You can get kind of a nice little effect here. Certainly adds some detail. Always aiming out, right? So I'm not aiming in towards the leaf with them. I'm always kind of going out. And then from here, if we need to brighten anything up, which I think I might on this guy just a little bit. It's fine, and it's all right to draw over the veins we just did. Again, we drew those in a different direction. So, and even if it hides them a little bit, that's okay. There we go. Oh, I guess I should also add a little burst to the to the stem. Light source coming from above and to the right, so therefore offsetting that towards the right. There we go. That's how it looks close. Can really see it. Take it off, certainly fine. Perfectly usable leaf. Can add it on. If you want to add like the look of wetness or something, you can certainly add water drops or add some white highlight to it. Or mix and match colors, because maple leaves do change to a nice red in fall, or they can. But yeah. Alright, so that is how you draw a maple leaf. I hope that was helpful. In the floating nether next to me, I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.